Hello, so for this uh, administration video, I'm going to be discussing the SFA, the School Function Assessment. Now you're going to want to include demographic information right here, which is in regards to the students' date of birth, their name, their gender, their current engagement in school setting, such as regular or special education courses. Then you're going to want to transition into, and also stating their date of assessment, date of birth, and then age of assessment. You're also going to want to transition into respondent information, which is going to include whether or not they have it, the individual that is going to be giving the information to for the assessment and their relation to the student. So you want to write down their name and their relation. Then you're going to want to transition down to the bottom below, where it's going to be in regards to the languages preferred to the client, such as German, English, Spanish, whatever their preference. Then you're going to want to go into the primary method of communication that they prefer, which is going to be written, verbal, finger spelling, gestures, whichever method they prefer. If more than one, make sure that you rank them in a score of 1 to whatever is the number of preferred languages that they or methods of communication that they prefer to engage in. Then you're going to transition into the primary means of mobility, which can be from walking alone to walking with the assistance of a cane or a wheelchair or a mobile wheelchair, whichever method of preference that they choose to engage in, or whatever number of methods of preference or methods of mobility that they prefer to engage in. Make sure to rank them accordingly, with one being the most preferred method. That's going to be the same for this one as well. In regards to communication, make sure to reference to being the most preferred method of communication being 1, and going to the highest or the least preferred being the higher numbers. Now you're going to want to transition over here to the most preferred method of written work, which is going to be in regards to what they prefer to write in, whether it be braille, computer, or writing by hand, or dictation. Whichever is the primary method of completing written work, that's what you list for this area. Then you're going to transition to what is their primary means of transportation that they prefer to get engaged in. This is going to be specifically in regards to school, to getting to school. So whether they prefer to use a bus or whether they prefer to use a school, bicycle, whatever their method, their primary method, only one method, make sure to write that down. Make sure that for this section that you state all the medical information that is most prevalent to the client. Stay right here. Identify individual categories that have been diagnosed with the client, such as mental retardation, autism, ADHD, and multiple disabilities. Then you're going to want to go ahead and make any special notes or comments right here. At the below right here, you're going to want to make sure that you identify whether the client is currently on level with academic performance or whether or not they are currently near grade level performance. And then if not, then you list the strengths and limitations that can be identified with the client. You're going to want to transition into the type of school setting that they currently have right here and identify whether or not they are public, private, or homeschooled, or in multiple other settings, whichever are listed right here. And then you're going to want to transition to here, which is classroom setting, which is whether or not they are in a regular setting or whether or not they're in a special education setting. Then transition down to here, which is going to be in regards to the services that are received by the child. These services can be PT, OT, or speech and language, or medical assistance. Whichever services are provided and listed right here, make sure to complete them accordingly. You're going to go ahead and go on to here, which is going to be in regards to the school layout. If the client has any individual endurance, mobility, or visual impairments, make sure that that you answer these questions below in regards to the number of classrooms that are available in the school, as well as the ADA compliance or physical features of the school that are currently listed right here. Make sure that they are all present, and if they are not present, do not check them. Go ahead and move on to the next section. We're going to be using a criteria at the very bottom of the page to begin. Make sure to know this criteria for the questions that are going for the scoring that is going to be right here. Make sure to use the scoring right here, which is going to be participation extensively limited, and being a score of 1 to 6 being a full participation. Then you're going to want to go ahead and use the scoring for right here, which is going to be in regards to participation and is going to be used in only, well, for these two, you're only going to want to use one of these individual rubrics, and then make sure to score them accordingly. You're going to want to make sure that you then move on to here and then score all of these completely in regards to the individual client's participation in a school setting, or in regards to the individual client's participation in that individual area or setting. Then you want to go ahead and transition into the next page. This one's going to have a different rubric, so make sure you pay attention and make sure to make note of the individual scoring criteria that are going to be required, as they do change per individual sections. Now, here, this one, you're going to want to make sure you go ahead and look at the bottom. 1 being extensive assistance required, and 4 being no assistance required. That's for assistance. Now, for the rating keys for adaptation, you're going to want to make sure that 1 is extensive adaptations and 4 are no adaptations needed. Make sure to reference to that rubric if you have any questions. Now, go ahead and complete this section. It's going to be in regards to task supports, in regards to helping aid the child's participation in these individual settings, or within these individual tasks, and the assistance and adaptations that are required. Make sure to only score these individual sections. Do not score these sections right here. If the child is able to complete these activities, then go ahead and score these as well, these individual scores as well. But do not, once again, score these areas, these 2 boxes. Now go ahead and move on to the next page. You're going to also complete the same activity, except these are going to be in regards to cognitive behavior tasks. Complete the same process with the assistance and adaptation scoring criteria as the same. You're going to go ahead and move on to the 3rd criteria. Now, for this section, you're going to want to use the rating rubric at the bottom, which is going to be does not perform being 1 and consistently performs at 4. You want to make sure that you use activity performance in regards to physical tasks, and those are going to be use the criteria that we stated right here, and use them right here and right here as well. Do not, once again, score these boxes below. Make sure to ask all the following criteria and identify all the following criteria and score accordingly. And make sure to score accordingly using that same criteria on this page as well. This one's page 6. The criteria is on page 7. Can be confusing, but make sure to use the same criteria for both of them. And then you're going to go ahead and transition to page 8. But just to reiterate, for page 6, make sure to use the criteria for here, here, and here, and the same criteria that you use on page 7. Just do not score the bottom boxes right here. Now, transitioning to page 7 or 8, you're going to want to go ahead and use the same scoring criteria of does not perform being 1 and consistently performs being 4. Now, you're going to use that for all of these individual areas in regards to activity performance and physical tasks. Make sure to score accordingly with the individual areas of engagement for the client. You're going to want to make sure to go into the 2nd page, or the page number 9, and complete the same scoring criteria for all of these 4 individual boxes as well. Make sure to score accordingly and in regards to the individual activity performance of that client and their participation in all of these individual areas. Score their participation and in regards to the respective scores that they deserve. Now you're going to go ahead and transition into the or score according to the most respective score that reflects their performance. And now go on to the page 10. It's going to be in regards to cognitive and behavioral tasks. Make sure to score their activity performance in regards to cognition and performance in regards to activity performance. And score with the same score of their participation in regards to these little criterias identified here and identified here at the bottom of the page, which is our next section, being still cognitive and behavioral tasks, but different concepts. And this one's following social conventions, and this one's following memory and understanding and functional communications. So make sure to answer the questions accordingly and keep continuing throughout the individual packet using the same criteria until you get to this page, or not this page. You can still continue to use the same criteria for this page as well, which is going to be in regards to activity performance again, but different areas in regards to task behavior and completion and positive interaction, and completing the scores accordingly here and here as well, with the individual scoring rubric right here being the same as we have consistently used before. Then you're going to transition to here being the last page of the individual activity performance area. You're going to use the same rubric for the individual scoring criteria shown right here for all the individual 3 sections. Make sure you do not, once again, score right here in the raw score sections, and make sure to circle all these individual scores accordingly for each individual box. Then go ahead and transition to the next page. This section is going to be an adaptations checklist. You're going to want to make sure that you identify every individual adaptation that is required and stated earlier within section 2 the adaptations that were used. Make sure to make note of which adaptations those were in this section. You want to make sure that you go ahead and state the adaptations for assistive daily living, such as a bib, diaper, toileting, dressing aids, whatever they need, and stair climber, elevator, signs, as stated right here, or a modification to role modifications or the use of reinforcements for behavior, and then classrooms such as magnifiers or the use of adapted scissors or modified writing paper, and then cognitive, whether adaptations are needed in the use of notebooks, extended time, or in communication, such as the use of signal skills or sign language, braille, microphone, or the use of computer that's needed, such as high-tech assistive equipment or high-tech assistive devices, and mobility seating, such as the use of crutches, a cane, or orthotics, or a car seat, or a rojo for a wheelchair, if any modifications or adaptations are needed there, as well as other adaptations that are needed, such as an aid or a peer assistance program. So these individual areas are all meant to address areas or adaptations that are going to be needed for the individual client. Now, make sure to make any extra notes or comments that you might have in regards to adaptations that might be used but aren't listed here at the very bottom of the page in this section right here. And that will go ahead and complete the assessment or administration process. I want to thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at my email. Thank you. In the interpretation for Giacomo, you're going to find that the individual scores, when accumulated, totaled, and categorized and graphed, that the areas of deficit that were greatest in regards to the individual participation was going to be playground and recess. That was shown to be the lowest score in participation. Now, these individual areas are ranked in difficulty. So initially, you're going to start off with classroom, regular, or special ed, then transitioning slowly to playground, transportation, bathroom, transitions, and mealtime. So these increase in difficulty. So as you get, or they decrease in difficulty. So as you get to the lower scores, they're supposed to get higher, and it does show that to be the case. However, in the initial scores, Giacomo was able to score high in certain areas. However, for specifically playground and recess time, he scored a very low score. So, and this, yes, this is a more difficult area. However, it is still an area that should be addressed, as he is a kid that is in second grade. So to try and help him engage more in recreational activity, which is one of the areas of deficit when you go into the second part, which you can then identify the individual activity performance, showing greatest deficits even in the chart in the areas of recreational movement and in regards to going up and down stairs. Now, out of the two deficits, you can notice that as soon as they hit these individual markers, they started to transition and increase. But and that was for both scores. When you hit the category for going up and down stairs, after that individual category, the score started to go back up. And that was also the case for recreational movement. Now, the careful thing to notice with this is that initially you're going to have very easy tasks that are supposed to be able to be accomplished without much of a challenge. As you go down in difficulty, as you go down the list in the activity performance within that individual assessment, the difficulty starts to increase, so the scores are supposed to get lower. So you go from initially just travel, like recreational movement, moving objects, then going to progressing down to using the lower extremities, and then the use of computer equipment and written work requiring more fine finger dexterity and lower extremities and manipulation of multiple objects and higher complex processes. So that's why the scores are supposed to get a little bit lower. For Giacomo, though, he had high scores in these areas. So while the recreational movement was shown to be initial, was one of the impairments that was shown to be at a lower difficulty and not shown to be at adequate score in comparison with going up and down stairs, I believe that the recreational movement should be more focused and addressed so that you can try to remediate his impairments, and hopefully you might see substantial improvement in regards to going up and down stairs due to the fact that the client is able to engage more in recreational activity as more increases his satisfaction in life, because going up and down stairs is not really, it wouldn't seem important to a child, and engaging in a recreational activity or recreational movements would be more important to a child. So that's why I would choose to address that particular problem in regards to helping the client engage in social participation. And then, as Spender of social learning theory has taught us, through social participation you can learn and integrate various areas of activity engagement to address finger dexterity and other areas of impairment, possibly the lower limbs, maybe through group activities in the future. So first, working on recreational movements so that the child can have fun with his life and engage in more activities of interest to him. Initial treatment of this individual client, you're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and use go ahead and make sure that you do passive range of motion to stretch out the individual muscles within the client upper and lower extremities. Make sure that the individual client doesn't pull a muscle and is safe when actually engaging in these activities. Next thing you want to go ahead and do is going to be to make sure that you, after you have stretched the individual child, then you're going to try and engage in a activity, since you're most likely going to have the child in a position that is not wheelchair constricted or wheelchair bound. Then you would want to work on trying to do a form of ball physics through instead of the concept being that you would have a medicine ball here, and then your individual client would be here and you would be right here, and the client would be here, and you would play patty cake in a sense, but it's more of a slow version of it, and you would try to make it more fun and be an activity that some kids still play, and is an activity that I believe would still be played and can be engaged with other children as well. But the variation that you make in regards to this is that this individual has CP, so has difficult mobility. So you're going to want to make sure, or possible issues with mobility. So you're going to want to make sure that you use mats instead of like medicine balls, or instead of those the therapy balls instead, so that the individual client has a larger base of support and will have less of a likely possibility of tipping over or falling off of the individual ball. So the mats that you would have are going to be 2 individual mats with both rectangles, but trying to make a square-like shape, so you have a strong base of support, and you can keep the client on that individual mat right here, and then you be right here, and both of you being on the mat, so the client can kind of gauge their movement in relation to yours in a similar manner. Now, for this activity, you're going to want to make sure that both of you are prone and facing each other, and you still engage in the patty cake activity. But the difference is that you have more of the individual padding underneath you and only be approximately 4 inches from the ground. And it's not much height, but it gives you room so that you can work your elbows, and possibly higher if you have difficulty with getting your elbows to cross and they keep rubbing against the ground. So, and the idea would be you play patty cake at that level, working on like the shoulder strength and trying to build it and increase strength and endurance within that regard. So, because at this motion, you're going to be already here at this motion, so you're going to be consistently elevating your arm and increasing. So you're going to have a lot of shoulder strength and endurance training, as well as increasing coordination and having fun with the activity that you can still be used to apply to recreational movement and be used and translated into engaging with others in a recreational manner. that's also an activity that will assist in other higher level activities of engagement that require a lot of stronger core strength. Now, for the last treatment that I would recommend would be in regards to painting using a brush with a like adapted brush for a longer width handle, possibly through the use of a plastic noodle. Try to use it so that you can help the client engage in a painting, and so that they can practice like painting like different designs onto, let's say, a mug or a canvas. And the idea would be that you would use a stencil so that it would come out in finer detail until the client builds up the ability to control the individual movements with finer and greater detail. Now, the idea is you still aim for that fine and concise detail, but you use the stencil to get them that more appreciated and look, which is more finer, and sometimes it's a little bit more recognizable. So that would be the goal, to like work on it towards the end, which would be a painting activity, and trying to make an end product that the client can have and possibly even take if they wanted to in the future. And that would be a skill that they could build upon in possible art expression and be used as a method of self-expression, but primarily also working on the finger dexterity and fine motor coordination, which is another component that you need to engage in certain recreational movements. Now, you would want to also engage in, that would be the end of the treatment for that, and that would be the cumulative treatment option that would be recommended to work on increasing fine motor coordination or finger dexterity, and working on strength and endurance training in the shoulder proximity, in the upper extremity, primarily in the shoulders, and then with the intent to improve ability for recreational movement engagement. And this will be shown through the goals. The client will engage will catch beach volleyball in a volleyball activity in 7 out of 10 trials with min assist within 2 weeks. That's going to be the short-term goal. The goal behind this activity is that the client will be able to demonstrate that they can actually catch individual objects, and the grasping pattern is there, that to whatever degree that they grab the ball, like it's a method of showing that they actually have achieved the ability to transport an object, and which is shown to be a category that they can engage in. So that manipulation and movement was shown to be a decent score of approximately 57 on the criterion score for this individual client. So this client should be able to possibly engage in catching of the object. So then the next goal would be to work on having them throw the individual object. And this is going to be the short-term goal. And the long-term goal being that the client will engage in a horse basketball activity for 10 to 15 minutes using a dodgeball with a peer with moderate assist upon discharge. So the goal is that the individual client plays basketball with an individual peer, and that they using a dodgeball, like a small foam dodgeball, not the big dodgeball. Use a small foam dodgeball that's lightweight, and they engage the horse activity, or horseshoe playing activity, or horse playing activity, not horseshoe. That they engage in the horse activity, and it allows the individual client to engage in recreational movement and participation in a activity that most kids play and that can be practiced upon when they actually leave the individual therapy session. And that will conclude the full assessment, administration, treatment, and goals. Thank you for your time, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.